See, this is hard. Trying to
yes,
really want
manage
to have this conversation, and I'm distracted by this stuff. Okay, we're gonna start over.
Okay,
I'm so sorry.
that's all right. Don't worry about it.
Just start with the name spelling.
Okay.
Kim
Duursma, Kymduursma.
Okay, great. And again, thank you for being here.
Yeah.
Let's go start with a little bit of your personal story, in your struggle with your own identity and how that began. So.
All right. Well, I think it began probably when I was really young, high school for sure. I didn't know that it began then, however, because I cared about women, I loved women, I was attracted to women, but it didn't mean anything to me because I thought everybody under the sun feels like this. Who wouldn't feel like this? Women are amazing people. So it didn't mean anything about me specifically at that time. And I dated boys in high school, nice boys, boys I had feelings for, and then I moved away to go to school at Western in Kalamazoo, and I think it was in my second year, there was a woman in several of my classes who I thought was just beautiful, sort of a non-traditional student, hippie chick, wonderful woman, and I would just sit in class sort of staring at her thinking, you're so smart and you're so beautiful. And I saw her at a Take Back the Night March on campus, and so I approached her and said, completely without any intention and innocently said, I just have to tell you, I have the hugest crush on you. And she said, oh, thank you. And we talked, and she said, why don't you come to my house? We're having a party after this. So I went, of course, just to be able to spend time with her. I went. And as the party's in progress, we were walking around outside, and she leaned over and she kissed me. And there were the fireworks that everybody talks about. And up until that point, there hadn't been fireworks. I mean, things felt good, but it wasn't the same sort of intensity and the same sort of passion. And we dated for a couple of years. She graduated, got a job offer in New Mexico, and said, let's go. And there was a 15-year age difference between us at that time also. And I thought, yeah, I can't say to mom and dad, I'm moving across the country to New Mexico. And oh yeah, by the way, I'm gay. So the relationship ended. I moved back to Grand Rapids.
Let me ask you something about this woman. Was she openly
yes.
gay? Okay. And did she help you understand what your feelings were about? Was there any kind of mentoring thing?
I think that there was, not consciously probably, but I think that there was some mentoring. Certainly, I became more involved in the community in Kalamazoo just by being associated with her, and was active with her and, did marches and things like that, Pride, which I had no knowledge of prior to that. So yeah, for sure, in that way she did. Though when she left and I moved back to Grand Rapids, I wasn't gay. It was her. There was something about her that drew me, and that's where my head was. It wasn't really about me, it was her. And when I moved back to Grand Rapids, I started dating a boy, and as we're dating, and I don't think it was even really long into the process that we're dating, he's talking about, well, yeah, I've had sex with boys and I like boys, so here you have a lesbian woman and a gay man trying to have a relationship, which was a great relationship. It was a great friendship, but that's where it ended. And so then, right around that point, I met another woman and had really strong feelings with her and fell in love with her. And at that point, I thought, yeah, this is not about these other people, this is about me. This is what's going on for me. And I think I was probably 25 at the time and was out at work. Everybody knew at the office. I was,
Planned Parenthood?
Yeah, at Planned Parenthood. And I was at that point also facilitating the Windfire youth group for.
Tell me about what's that youth group?
Windfire is a social support group, or was a social support group, designed to help youth who know they're gay, who want a place to have support, who are questioning whether they're gay, who think they might be bisexual. And I started facilitating that in 1992, and for a lot of the kids that I worked with, it wasn't safe for them to be out.
Tell me a little bit about the origin. Did Planned Parenthood create Windfire?
Not directly.
Okay.
It got started in the mid-'80s. A young boy teenage boy, moved to Grand Rapids from, I want to say Washington State, but I'm not positive about that. And there was a group that met in Washington State. And he was talking, now that he's living in Michigan and still probably more than ever wanting the support of a group, started talking to some people, is there a group? And my supervisor's partner, Michael May, said, hey, I'm willing to start a group. We'll start Windfire. I will sort of put the word out about this, and if people come, they come, we'll have a group. If nobody comes, then it's just you and I having this group, but we'll see what happens. And
can you tell me a little bit about the origin of the name?
I believe it came from the young man himself who moved here, because that was the name of the group that he was in out of state. And so the name just transitioned here. And where beyond that it came from, I'm not sure. And so they were meeting, and for years, people kept coming, and more kids kept coming. And then Michael had facilitated the group for 7 years and said, it's time to let somebody else take it over. And because he's partnered with my supervisor at Planned Parenthood, and because I work in the education department at Planned Parenthood, and because I'm lesbian, my supervisor said, hey, do you want to check this out and see, if you like doing this volunteer group? And I did.
Was it sort of what was the model of the group? People just came to talk?
It's a social support group, so people could come. And one of the things I think that's a really big struggle for gay folks, and particularly at that time, maybe not so much today, but at that time, was these young folks would come into group thinking, I'm the only one. There's no one else in the world out there like me. Or if they are, they're freaks, because that's how the media portrayed us. And so kids would come and realize, oh, I can just be me here. I don't have to pretend. We would do some educational things in the group. We would talk about healthy relationships. We would certainly talk about HIV, and because of my work at Planned Parenthood, other sexually transmitted infections and those sorts of things. We would sort of pay attention to what's going on in the media or what's going on in the world around orientation issues. And sometimes it was just, I had a horrible week and I have to talk to somebody about it. So we were there to be fun, to be social, to be educational, any type of safety network, essentially, that teens needed. And they did need it. We would meet every Thursday from 7 o'clock until 9 o'clock in the evening at Fountain Street Church. And most of the teens at that time couldn't say, oh, Mom, Dad, I'm going to the gay youth group. Several of them said, Mom, Dad, I'm going with my friend to a church youth group, which is a whole different situation then for people. Parents are like, oh, great, my kid wants to go to a church youth group, wonderful. And we would sometimes have 5 kids, we would sometimes have 30 teens in the group. And it depended on the time of year, it depended on who knew to refer them, who knew about the group, because by and large, the group was really word of mouth. We would do some advertising in terms of, I would send out pamphlets to high school counselors and to counselors who worked with teens and anybody that I felt was engaged with youth. So we would get a lot of referrals that way, but a lot of it was word of mouth.
Right. Let me ask you about, in terms of the organization, because, you know, again, and we'll probably get to these political tensions, but the tension, was there any tension within Planned Parenthood as an organization, like that story I told you about Lubbers? Okay?
Right.
Our primary mission at Planned Parenthood is, and we've taken this on, but it could jeopardize that. Was there any of that kind of?
No. No, I am so very fortunate to work for an organization that from the minute that I came out and before I came out was extremely supportive of diversity in all forms. And I am fortunate enough to have a supervisor who gets it, who knew this is about human sexuality. It's what we do. It's Planned Parenthood. And so there was never a moment where I felt like my job might be in jeopardy, where Planned Parenthood believed, boy, we might not get funding for this program if Kim is associated with this. In fact, in a lot of ways, it helped because our funders were also, most of the time, like-minded people. So I'm really, really fortunate in that regard.
Yeah. Well, because you know, you hear now, I mean, it's been in the news a lot, this, you know, current Congress and the attacks against Planned Parenthood, right?
Yes.
It seems like the intensity, it keeps getting more, and so the misrepresentation of that Planned Parenthood is where you go to have an abortion.
Right.
So this is another, and for me, it's like, wow, I didn't know.
Yeah.
What a great thing, Planned Parenthood. But why isn't that message getting out there? And there must have been some, like that story I told about Grand Valley, where they're trying to build this building, and that this anti-gay agenda is so strong, and that they're not, at least, they're not embarrassed about that at all. They feel they're justified.
Right.
And that they will remove the funding from a $5 million building because of something that is obviously right to do.
Right. I think we escaped that at Planned Parenthood because we're already on the fringe talking about sexuality and admitting that people are sexual beings, and not just admitting that people are sexual beings, but that even teenagers are sexual beings. So I think when you're already marginalized because you've taken the right stance and said, yes, we are sexual beings, we're already getting grief for that. And I think the average person, like you sort of alluded to, well, abortion, well, what does that have to do with gay and lesbian folks? Or even birth control, what does that have to do with gay and lesbian folks? I think in some ways we were able to sort of fly under the radar with that. It certainly fits within our mission when you're looking at human sexuality in all of its forms. But people think of our mission as abortion or contraception, and so they neglect to even look at the other parts, I think. So in some ways, people just wouldn't think, well, Planned Parenthood, of course they're dealing with orientation issues.
Right. So in your work with Windfire, how is this affecting your own, you know, coming out, your own, how's it informing you? Because, you know, I'm sorry to interrupt.
No, that's okay.
The story of Wendy and the students saying, wait a minute, these guys are out and about, and here we are. So
yeah, it became, for me, I mean, it was just normal for me to talk about who I am. It was normal, even in, you know, the context of people calling and saying, we need somebody to come and do a panel discussion about gay youth. Sure, I'm fine doing that. I'm fine telling you that I'm gay. The people who didn't know were my family. I hadn't told my family at that point, and not because I thought that they wouldn't love me. I didn't ever doubt that they would love me. I think my worst fear was that they were going to be disappointed, and I didn't want to disappoint my family. And all along in this time, I'm sort of dropping clues. I remember coming home from college one weekend, Linda and I, my friend Linda and I said something about holding the flag in front of the Gay Pride March. And my mom said, you know, you're 18. what you do doesn't have any reflection on me anymore. And I said, I don't believe you mean that. I mean, what if I was holding the flag? And she said, well, good for you. So, okay, there's one little seed planted. And then later on, my mom and I were going out to dinner and shopping for my birthday, and it was on a Thursday, so it was before I was going to group, and I was telling my mom about what we were going to do in group, and my mom looks at me in the car and she says, is experience required to facilitate this group? And I said, Mom, are you asking me? And she said, nope. And so that was it. But it's happening, and I started to feel like it's really unfair for me to be telling everybody else in the world and not them. And as much as I was nervous about it, I didn't want them to find out from somebody else. And it's a small community. I didn't want one of my mom's friends calling up and saying, well, hey, I saw your daughter. So I decided.
Yeah, because especially if you're at these panels and.
Yeah, I was very public about it. It was not anything that I was keeping secret at all. And I think the first person that I told in my family was my sister. I went to pick her up at U of M and bring her home for the weekend, and we're driving home, and she said, you seem kind of upset. And I said, yeah, Eric and I had a fight. I'm upset about that. And she said, well, why are you upset about that? And I said, well, because we're dating. But you mean you're gay? And I said, yeah, that's what I mean. She said, no, she said, we're dating. You're dating? And I said, yeah, dating. But she's a girl. I said, yep, I got that part. And so she said, but you're not gay. And I said, yeah, and I am. Oh, my friends have been saying that for years. And I said, they were right.
She's a younger sister?
Yeah, yep, 9 years younger than I am. And so we talked about everything else under the sun, and as we get on the off-ramp to get into Grand Rapids, she said, I really think gay people should be able to get married. I think that should happen. So that was her way of saying, Kim, it's okay with me. I had gone canoeing with my brother and my girlfriend, and as it turns out, canoeing wasn't such a great activity for my partner and I to do at that time. Somebody was going to get cracked with an oar because we couldn't really work it out. So we ended up switching canoes, got home. My brother and his friends came into the apartment, and my girlfriend and I were kissing to sort of make up, and my brother's friend walks in and sees us, unbeknownst to me. So my brother calls me that night, and he said, is there something that you want to tell me? And I said, no, I don't think so. And he said, well, Jimmy walked in and he saw you guys kissing. And he said, I just want you to know that you are the best aunt that Cassandra could have. I love you. And this is the first time my younger brother has ever said, I love you to me. And he said, you are welcome with anyone that you fall in love with in my home. I want you to be a part of my life. And I said, no, I don't have anything to tell you. And that is a big regret that I have to this day. And I said, if there's anything to tell, you'll be the first to know. Well, he wasn't the first to know, and I feel horrible that I didn't call him and say, you know, Mike, you were right. It wasn't about me not trusting you. It was about me not being ready. Well, my brother and sister told on me all the time for stuff that I did, so I'm not so dumb. They're going to tell Mom and Dad. Yeah, no, they didn't tell Mom and Dad. So I decided, okay, I woke up one morning and I said, today's the day. I have to tell them. So I called my mom and I said, I'm coming home for dinner. Okay, so I get there and Mom's at the stove cooking, my dad's somewhere in the yard putzing around, and when there's big stuff in our family, we'll start with so. So I said, so, and my mom's like, so? I said, so you know I'm gay, right? And like silence, no, just easing into it. I just put it right out there. Yeah, I guess so. And I said, and I'm crying. And she said, well, and it's nothing to cry about. She said, I love you. We love you. Nothing you could do could ever change that. She said, I feel sad and I feel worried for you because you should not have to worry about being hurt or being judged for who you love. I'm worried that you're going to have a harder life because of this. So I was okay. Well, then it was out. Nobody said anything about it. No more talk about it. I think it had to digest. And probably 6 months later, we deal with stuff in my family with humor. So 6 months later, I'm home for dinner. My sister's there, and she has sparkly eye makeup on. And my mom says, "What's up with the glitter?" And my sister said, "It's fairy dust." And my mom says, "One fairy in the family is enough." So it's like, okay, you're joking about it. This is good. You know, and I also at that time was going through a breakup, and I thought, my family is so tremendously important to me. I can't go through another breakup without the support of my family, without them knowing and being able to help me through this. And they have been great. They have been incredibly supportive, though still, I think, worried about my rainbow flag flying on my porch, about being on TV, talking about being gay, being at the Pride celebrations, though they know that that's who I am. And I think while they're worried, there's also some pride in that for them as well. And because my parents really moved heaven and earth to make things happen for me when I was a teenager. They came to all of my games. They came to any events that I was in. They were incredibly supportive. I don't have kids. I felt like being a part of Windfire, I could pay back that love that they gave to me for some kids who didn't have that love in their families. So I would drive, probably for 2 years, I drove back and forth to Sparta every Thursday night to pick up a young woman to bring her to group. And that's my thanks to Mom and Dad for being there for me, and I can pay that forward.
Yeah, that's beautiful. That's because I was thinking about, you must have run into at Windfire kids who are coming from a family that, you know, because my experience would be, it is my experience that, you know, the right, those are my people, right?
Right, right, yes.
Christian Reform,
Yes.
you're going to hell, you know, so, and you must have run into kids in this community like that, right? And
Absolutely.
So, and so that, the gratitude for what your family, how, you know.
And that went beyond my mom and dad and my brother and sister. That went to all of my relatives. When I came out to all of my family, everybody was incredibly supportive. And, you know, I had an aunt who said, "So tell me about who you like. Are you dating someone? What kind of people are you attracted to?" So same sort of questions you might ask about anyone who's dating. And I thought, at the time that I came out, my grandma and grandpa were in their 80s. And I thought, they'll get it or they won't. It's okay. They're in their 80s. I don't need to change anything about them. And my grandpa was a carpenter by trade. And so when I bought my house, I said to him, "Hey, can I have some of your tools to work on my house with?" So my girlfriend Liz and I at the time went to my mom and dad's for Sunday dinner, and Grandma and Grandpa were there, and we were playing marbles with Grandma and Grandpa says, "So, what are you working on the house?" And I said, "Well, I just tore up the bathroom floor. I just drywalled the bathroom and put in a new tub." And he looks at Liz and he elbows her and he says, "Is the bathtub big enough for two?" And I thought, oh, Grandpa gets it. All right. So it was everyone in my world, and you're absolutely right. I had kids who would come to Windfire who had been kicked out of their house for being gay. You can't live here anymore. Kids of all different faiths that because of their parents' faith, they couldn't stay anymore because they were going to hell and either had to change their ways or leave. 15-year-old kids. It's incredible to me, coming from the family that I come from and getting the love that I got, that someone would say, see ya, you're not our family anymore. We don't know you. And it happened far too many times.
And I'm always, it's, you know, the Fiddler on the Roof, right, where how the tradition, the first daughter doesn't want to do the arranged marriage.
Right.
But she's still working within the limits of, you know.
Yeah.
And then the second one, and then finally the third one, he can't do it. He has to say goodbye to her.
Yeah.
It's so sad.
Yes.
That because he pushes himself to be accepting, and he can do it with the first one. He does it with the second one, and the third one, it's somebody from a different faith, right?
Yeah.
And that's such a sad scene to me, you know?
It is.
Right.
And it's so real.
It's so real, right? Yeah. Amazing.
Yeah.
So, in a perfect world, because I felt like, and I had this conversation with Wendy too, you know, looking at my own history. I did a film with a woman in Minneapolis who was, you know, 90. At the time I met her, she was a writer. Her name was Meridelle Lesueur, and she, you know, feminist activist. You know, she was communist and had to hide with the Indians during the
sure.
McCarthy era, and she was, you know, I was, there was a guy interviewing her, I was doing the filming, and she said something about this Puritan village that she grew up in, where everybody's wearing blinders and they put you in a box. And, she said it really damaged me. And he said, well, how did it damage you? You know, and I was like, yeah, I'm feeling damaged by how I grew up. And she said, well, my natural tendency to be a loving, kind person instead of judgmental, suspicious, paranoid, you know. And I was asked Wendy that question, and she had the same answer. She grew up in a Unitarian. Her father was a Unitarian minister. She was married to a Unitarian. She said the minister would read from the Quran, the Bhagavad Gita.
Oh,
you know?
yeah.
And your story sounds very similar to that. And it's like, oh, man. But I also hear this, you couldn't tell them at first, your own. In a more perfect world, like with these teenagers, and what maybe, what I'm hearing is all the issues that maybe the previous generation had, they said, well, coming out, that's not an issue for us anymore. Marriage, who cares?
Right.
We don't necessarily respect that institution. And,
right.
So all the stuff that you felt that it wasn't okay, did that just come from the culture, you think? Or was that part of anybody's struggle with sexual identity?
Both, probably. I think I graduated from high school in 1984. Never in my high school time frame, in any class in high school, did I hear anything about gay. That the only time I heard anybody talking about anything related to being gay was Boy George, Prince, Michael Jackson, some of the people that were in the media, and people would make comments about or to tease someone about being gay, although that wasn't as bad as it is today. I don't think the teasing, because it just wasn't on people's radar. So like I said, when I had these feelings, I didn't think they meant anything. I mean, what I knew to be true was that women grew up to fall in love with men. I didn't realize, and maybe I was just really naive, I don't think so, but maybe I was naive. I didn't know there was any other option. And so I think I'm trying to fit who I am into the only option I ever saw, which is a heterosexual mom and dad, heterosexual culture, and yeah, I'm not fitting, which is no surprise. I mean, I've never sort of fit. I've always been the boat rocker, so it wasn't a big surprise. But that explains that it taking me so long to figure out, okay, this is who I really am. And I think I did get enough of a message that it wasn't so much of an option, and I don't think it was verbal. I think it was just sort of an unwritten rule that existed that, yeah, I knew this could be disappointing to my parents.
You know, one of the things that, and I'm just thinking about sort of male, female, around this issue with men, young men,
Mm-hmm.
if it isn't harder, as far as the bullying, that there are some, I think with boys, there's some sort of more obvious traits, more sort of feminine,
Sometimes,
that they get picked on.
yes.
Think that's true, that it's sort of that there's a bit of a different struggle?
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Absolutely. And I think part of that is cultural too. As a woman today, or even in high school, well, maybe not in high school, but in high school today, if I said I'm a lesbian or I'm bisexual, men are going like, I want to have her come home with me. She's cool like that. So there's a sexual appeal for men in the fact that I'm a lesbian. Well, it's not sexual for me at all, but it's sexualized for them. And so I think in that regard, men can completely tolerate women who are lesbian, because really we're just doing it for their pleasure. And for guys, and I think a lot of this ties into other movements when you're talking about women's rights. For a man to be gay, I think our culture looks at, why would you willingly take a demotion? Why would you want to step down from the power position of being a man to the less powerful position of being a woman? As if a man who declares his sexuality as being gay now is a woman. No, he's a man. He's a man who just wants to partner with men. So yes, you're absolutely right. I think that it is harder for men. And I think today, the hardest group of folks, I think, is for people who are transgender, who are struggling with wondering, not just am I gay or straight, but am I male or female? Something that's so core to how we see ourselves and who we perceive ourselves to be, and to have that internal struggle. And teenagers are not all that nice sometimes, and they can go right for the jugular. So my experience has been with the young people in Windfire, a lot of times if they were out, if they were in your face, they had a core group of friends, people who would say, we're going to fight for you too. Discrimination in any form is not okay. We're befriending you. We're looking out for you. And there might have been other peripheral groups saying, you're a loser, you're going to hell, whatever. But I think they had some insulation from that in the support that they would gather. I think for the youth who were struggling, and for some people who it was obvious that, yeah, you're not straight, you just can't be, and we're trying to keep it secret, people sensed, I think, that there was some secret and would pick and pick and pick. And unfortunately, a lot of times in high schools, they didn't have the support even of the staff. There was one young man who came to group, had a horrible day. He said, Kim, I don't know that I can go to school anymore. And I said, talk to me, what's going on? He went to his gym teacher and he said, the guys are hassling me in gym. I hate gym. I don't want to get undressed with these guys. I don't want to be in the locker room with these guys. They're telling me they're going to beat me up because I'm gay. The gym teacher said, well, you are, aren't you? And so to think that the adult people who are supposed to be the safe people in your life are people who, in fact, I think he said, yeah, the kids are calling me a fag. And the teacher said, well, you are a fag, aren't you? That in any world, at any time, that's okay. Unfortunately, I think that's still true today. Not for all teachers. I think there are some amazing teachers. But I think that there are teachers who, in a classroom, when kids are saying, that is so gay, or you're such a fag, teachers let it roll.
Right. Well, it's interesting, though, in terms of the LGBTQ, that sort of this reclaiming that word. I think that's
yes,
powerful, right?
yes.
Saying owning the
And it's a very, language is so interesting, and I love that people are using the word queer, and I like the motivation behind using the word queer. And it doesn't really tell you anything about anybody's orientation other than I refuse to be defined by what our culture says we have to choose as orientation. Yet I was in Saugatuck with some friends having dinner at a restaurant, and there was a table full of older gentlemen, and I said something about queer. I thought they were going to come unglued. They actually turned around and lit into me about the word queer, and you should not, that's a horrible word, and you should never use that word. And I meant no offense in saying that word and explained that. And I get from their perception, queer was not a good word. And so I'm sensitive. And even in doing education, a lot of my work through Planned Parenthood is doing education around LGBT issues and trainings to help staff of all different organizations be gay friendly. And whenever I say queer as a term and people are over 45 or 50 years old, you can see them just go, oh, she said queer and that's a bad thing. So it is interesting how language changes.
Yeah, it's powerful. And so you still, is Windfire still in existence?
It is not.
Okay.
It is
Talk
not.
about what happened there.
What happened is, for years, off and on, I had co-facilitators, and always really wanted male co-facilitators because I can present one picture, and I'm certainly only just one picture of the gay community in the US, in the world. I'm just that one picture, and I thought for young men, and particularly at that time, we had more young men than women attending the group. And so I really looked for male co-facilitators and couldn't find anyone who could commit long-term. And so after 12 years of meeting every Thursday evening from 7 o'clock until 9 o'clock and having a phone line that rang into my house, answering crisis calls, taking the kids to Cedar Point, doing things beyond those 2 hours on a Thursday night, time had shifted. Ellen happened. There were people, Will and Grace happened. People were more publicly out. And at that time, I think the group sort of started to morph into a social group where people would come and hang out and talk about nothing in general. And it wasn't necessarily that they wanted to do any educational programming. And I thought, well, after 12 years of doing this, maybe we don't need this in quite the same way that we did before. And if I'm just going to socialize, I want to socialize with my friends. So I decided, okay, I'm going to step down. And there wasn't anyone at that time who was willing to step up. And then there was a woman, Barb Rankin, who said, okay, I'll take over the group. I can't see this group end. This group just can't end. So she started facilitating the group at the network. And they decided, well, we're going to just make this a whole new group. And they changed the name to Plus, People Like Us, which is really great. So a couple years after she started doing the group, she called me and said, hey, Kim, would you be willing to come and do a couple-week series on healthy relationships? And I said, sure, I would love to, because I had been out of it for probably 2 years at that time. Oddly enough, I missed the teens. I missed the drama of the teens, and I would have never said that I would ever miss the drama of it, but that teen energy and that passion I missed, so I started back up doing it, and that's been 5 or 6 years ago, and I'm still there today.
Okay.
I never left after that.
Yeah. Well, one of the issues that has come up a lot about people, particularly, and maybe it's true now too, in terms of social, that there aren't places to go. It's like bars. We were, Wendy and, we talked to, there was a bookstore, Sons and Daughters.
Yes.
And we did one of the Skype calls with Jeff.
Oh, yeah, yeah.
And that was, yeah, when it's, I'm not into the bar scene, you know, people have said, and yet that was the only place to go. So the social thing seems very important. What's your sort of take on that?
It still is
Where do you
very,
socialize?
yeah, it still is very challenging. It's interesting, and I can only speak to Grand Rapids, though I suspect that this happens in a lot of places. For years, having a booth for Windfire at Pride and being involved in Pride, and this one day out of the year, seeing hundreds of people, like, where are you people? I don't know you. It's not that big of a community, but where do you, you know, and I'm not somebody who likes to go to the bar. And I was also very careful about that as the facilitator and director of Windfire. I have to model certain behaviors. And I feel very strongly about that. I'm not going to be falling down drunk at the bar and have these kids hear about it or see about it. And then, well, you know, that's gay people for you, drunk all the time. And so that wasn't my thing. And even today, you'll see pockets, groups of people, and men not necessarily socializing, gay men not necessarily socializing with lesbian women. Through the network, there are probably more things happening. There are some like meet and greet dinners for professional folks. And in fact, after I started going back to the Plus youth group and facilitating there, I went through a breakup and I thought, I don't know how to meet women in this community. I don't know. I mean, I'm not in college, so I have other sort of college people. I'm not at the bar. I thought, well, okay, I'll be on the board of the network. That's how I'll meet people. Well, I met a lot of cool people, mostly men, and then ended up being the president of the board of the network for a while, and tried what my vision was for the network was to create sort of a community center that if you didn't want to go to the bar, that this would be a place to meet people. It's hard to make that happen. I think a lot of times people are just doing their life. They're, you know, and so it is challenging.
Yeah. So let's talk a little bit about this, you know, being in West Michigan and the, you know, the pushback that comes that to us, some of us seems like more so than other communities because of, you know, the philanthropy of these people.
Right.
And recently, you know, this ordinance that did anti-discrimination, which was turned down in Holland, right?
Yes.
Same people.
Mm-hmm.
What do you have to say about that? What's your experience with that? Do you think that, I mean, they're on their way up. Somebody said, you know, look, if you look at the demographics and do the polling,
Yeah.
they don't have a chance.
Right, hang on to your antiquated notions, you're the only one.
Right, but one of the things in that Howard Zinn definitely documents very well is that you're also a little naive if you don't think there's going to be this pushback, you know?
Yeah, absolutely.
And so I just want to hear what your experience is about that and what you might say, here's where I see some of the pushback.
Right. Yeah, it's interesting. Personally, I've never had a problem, ever. I'm extremely fortunate. I think in some ways I'm fortunate because I don't necessarily look like what people think a stereotypical lesbian would look like, which I have no control over. I look like I look. And in fact, sometimes early have gotten more grief from the gay community for looking like a girly girl than from the straight community who just assumes that I'm straight. And so I think for a lot of people, we can sort of fly under the radar, intentionally or not. I've certainly heard things, probably the biggest things I've heard when I moved into my house, the Windfire phone line was a separate phone line from my home number, but it would ring into my home. And I would periodically get phone calls, "You're going to hell, you deserve to get AIDS and die," left messages on the machine. And I think, really? You've got that much time on your hands that you can call these random numbers and leave hate messages like that? And luckily, I was able to put it off on, "You're an ass. You're a knucklehead. This has nothing to do with me or who I am." And then when I moved into my house, the phone line went with me. And in the phone book, it said lesbian and gay helpline. So this was obviously what it is. And when I called to have them move the phone, they set up an appointment, missed the appointment. I called again and I said, "Okay, I can take the morning off of work. When are you going to be here?" They missed the appointment. So I called again and said, "Look, I can't take any more time off of work for this. When are you coming?" So they came, and I had my dad come in and be there because I had to work. And my dad said, "What's the story? Why is this happening? Why do I have to be here while my daughter's at work because you've messed this up twice?" And the guy said, "Just between you and I, we couldn't get anybody to come hook up a gay phone." And my dad said, "It's a gay phone." He's like, "I didn't realize." And he said, "Did you think by being in the house you were going to be gay? Like, that's ridiculous." So in some ways, insidious, not necessarily quite so blatant. Yeah, I felt it. There was a young woman who was going to Cornerstone College and was struggling with her identity. And they sign an abstinence pact when they sign up and enroll at Cornerstone College. Yes, and of course, abstinence, you're talking from heterosexual sex because that's the only type of sex that there is at Cornerstone. And she was really struggling, and it was really causing some depression for her. She's like, "I feel compelled. I have these feelings. I don't want them. My faith is really important to me. I don't know what to do with these feelings, yet here I am, I have them." And so her roommate said, "What's going on with you? Why are you so depressed?" "Don't worry about it. I'm just struggling with some stuff." "Well, I've disclosed all of this stuff to you. Why aren't you telling me? I feel like we're not friends. You're not telling me." So finally she says, "I've never had sex with anybody, but I'm really having these strong feelings for women." The roommate, concerned about her soul, goes to the RA and says she thinks she might be gay. RA goes to the Dean of Students. Dean of Students comes to her and says, "We hear that you might be gay. What's the story?" She said, "I'm struggling with this." And he said, "You've got two choices. You can drop out right now. No money refunded, nothing. You're just done. Or you can do counseling weekly on campus, and you can publicly apologize to the entire dormitory." And she left. All the money that she had invested in that school was gone, not to mention the emotional trauma that she's going through. So in that way, yeah, I see it. And a lot of times now, even in doing education at Planned Parenthood, I work in the jail, I work in treatment programs, and oftentimes people will say, "Yeah, you're gay, you're going to hell." In a lot of ways, they don't. This doesn't have to do with religion. It's about fear. It's about all of these things, and I feel like it's my job, in whether it's around orientation or anything else, to push you to think about things and what's really going on here. In fact, I had a guy who was talking about gay people going to hell. And I said, "Okay, you can't use the Bible as a weapon like that. You just can't." And I said, "Oh, and so by the way, what are you in for?" I find don't hide behind the Bible. And unfortunately, sort of like we were talking about earlier, a lot of the